Fareed, you and I are going to do a little Q&A right now. It's been an incredible news year. Here are some questions for you. Let's go to the first question and give me your answer. How do you see the president's positive COVID-19 test affecting the upcoming U.S. presidential election, which is less than a month away?
Basically, it's bad for him. It's bad for him because it returns the subject, in my view, correctly, to COVID. Anything that brings us back to the pandemic is bad for Donald Trump because the American people have essentially made a decision that he has mishandled it. Frankly, rightly or wrongly, in my view, it's largely an accurate diagnosis. But if you look at the polls, that's pretty clear. And if you look at Trump's strategy, Donald Trump's election strategy has been to try to change the subject, to talk about Black Lives Matter, to talk about the dangers of violence in the suburbs, to talk about the law and order, by which he means law and disorder. And so all these are diversionary tactics. And by contracting COVID himself in what appears to be a somewhat irresponsible fashion at essentially a kind of super spreader event, it's difficult to change the subject as easily as he'd like to. So I think he was in any case not in great shape. I have always felt that Donald Trump was fundamentally quite unpopular. If you look at his disapproval rating, it's always been above 52%. And COVID reminds us of his greatest weakness, his handling of the pandemic.
What will happen, Fareed, if the election is November 3rd and we don't have the results? It's close, and we don't have the results November 3rd, November 4th, November 5th. What do you think is going to happen?
So I laid out in a couple of shows some scary scenarios because I am very worried about this, Wolf. Honestly, the American Constitution does not have the most perfect mechanism for handling all this. Part of it is, the elections were not always directly democratic. So the states have a lot of latitude in terms of choosing electors and things like that. But let me begin by saying, if the polls are right, and I know we all know the caveats, but one has to point out, the 2016 national poll was correct. It had Hillary leading by about 3.5 points. She won by about 3 points. Biden is up by 8 points. It is quite conceivable that this whole conversation will be moot because he will win big and early. But if he doesn't, and if the scenario you're describing unfolds, which is possible because Trump voters tend to vote in person and Biden voters seem to be voting mail-in, if that happens, again, the press has an important role. We have to educate the American public to understand it's not election day, it's election week. In point of fact, as you well know, Wolf, the states never certified the elections on election night. They did actually go through the counting, and there were sometimes recounts. It would often take a few days. Media organizations using statistical models call the election on election night. We just have to be very clear that that is not possible, that these states are too close to call. I think of you in some ways as the arbiter. You're going to be the guy who people will look to. And it's very important for us to maintain that accuracy. I think the system will hold. I think that Trump will try probably a lot of shenanigans. I think there will be lots of lawsuits. But at the end of the day, I do believe that we will be able to get a fairly clean outcome. If we don't, I believe it will go to the Supreme Court and it will get resolved. I'm an optimist. You can't be an immigrant without being an optimist. And so at the end of the day, while I worry a lot and I have a lot, and I've laid out these issues precisely to get people, vigilant, I think we'll get through it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm an optimist too. The good news, there's a lot of good news, but one really excellent piece of good news for you. You have a book coming out tomorrow entitled 10 Lessons for a Post-Pandemic World. So how are our lives? Give us a little preview of this book, because I hope it's going to be a major, major bestseller. Give us a little preview how our lives are going to be different in this post-pandemic world.
Well, if it becomes a bestseller, it all depends on whether I can get on the Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer.
Well, you're in the Situation Zoom now. If you work really hard and play by the rules, maybe one day you'll be in the Situation Room.
Look, the probably Lenin is supposed to once have said, I use this, but I have to confess, as a good journalist, I did try to check the quote. It's one of these quotes. It's too good to check. The way I put it in the book is Lenin is supposed to have said that there are decades when nothing happens, and then there are weeks when decades happen. I think COVID-19 has been one of those weeks metaphorically. Everything has accelerated. So much has happened. And the principal force has been acceleration. So think about digital life. We all knew we were moving in some way to some of these kinds of technologies, but we have now seen this massive acceleration. By the end of 2020, 1 billion people will have had visits with their doctor on Zoom or some such digital technology. This was something people thought would take 10 years to happen. Or if you look in geopolitics, we know that the United States and China have been drifting from a kind of collaborative relationship that they had, say, 20 years ago, to a more competitive, even antagonistic one. This has all gotten accelerated as a result of the pandemic. So if you're trying to understand the pandemic in very simple terms, it's the world has gone on fast forward right now.
A lot of the experts, the public health experts, don't believe this is going to be the last pandemic that we're going to have to go through. They think there are going to be more health pandemics down the road. Do you think we're going to do better handling the next one than we've done handling this one?
I actually think that you'd imagine that we've learned our lessons, but I'm not sure. I think that there are things about the American healthcare system that make it particularly bad at handling these kind of public health epidemics. We don't have universal care. So pockets of the population are left out from the start. Because of that lack of access, there are lots of people who worry about going into a hospital, going and getting tested, going and getting care because they worry that they can't afford it. All these kind of inequalities, which might have been okay, and I don't really think they were fine normally, but in a public health situation where no one is safe if everyone is not safe, it doesn't work at all. And there's a larger issue, Wolf, which is, you are right, we are going to see more of these. It is highly unlikely this is the last. And the reason is we are living a life in a very risky way that almost invites these it's almost a kind of nature's revenge. Think about the fires in California. Think about the hurricanes. Think about the droughts. And think about the pandemics. These are all happening because of a kind of careless, reckless way that we're living. I describe it in the book, and I talk about it as nature's revenge. We've got to start living more thoughtfully in a more sustainable way that allows human beings to flourish, but allows the planet to survive as well.
One final question before I let you go, Fareed, and we're not going to let you go, but one final question, at least in this segment right now. If Biden does win the election, becomes the next president of the United States, is inaugurated on January 20th, 2021, as far as foreign policy is concerned, where do you see the country moving in a different direction than what we've seen over the past 4 years during the Trump administration?
I think the single biggest shift will be to a re-embrace of America's allies. There's the strangest thing about Donald Trump is that he really doesn't like the world. He thinks that everyone's ripping the United States off. But he reserves his greatest hostility for America's historic allies, the countries that have fought in 70 years of American-led wars, whose soldiers have bled and died with Americans. It's the British, the French, the Germans. He has a fine relationship with Putin. He has a good relationship with Modi. He has a good relationship with Erdogan. He loves the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. But it's our allies that he has found most distasteful. So I think you're going to see a re-embrace of America's historical mission and of its historical allies.
Very important point indeed. Fareed, thank you very much. Truly valuable insight. Good luck with the new book. I'm predicting already a major bestseller. And certainly it's an honor to work with Fareed at CNN. We got a great team at CNN, and Fareed makes all of us so proud. I certainly look forward to his weekly commentaries in the Washington Post. I'm a regular viewer of his Sunday morning show, 10 a.m. Eastern, Fareed Zakaria GPS. If you don't watch it, you're missing a lot. You'll be a lot smarter after that hour than you were when you go into that hour.